ta'ala to protect us with His power. We ask you to give us healing. He is Ash-Shafi. We ask Him to give us rizq. He is Al-Razzaq. We ask Him to give us protection. He is Al-Hafidh. And we ask Him to guide us to the right path all the time. He is Al-Hadi. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to gather us on the day of judgment. Sorry, no problem. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to also gather us on the day of judgment the same way He gathered us tonight. And we ask Allah to make us among the people of the masjid throughout our lives. Ameen. One of the things that been discussed in a controversial way in the past several decades is the relationship between men and women. Are they equal? Are they identical? Who's stronger? Who's oppressed? Who's oppressor? And this fight, I want to call it, or this conflict between genders is something unfortunately been going on recently and taken some extremes in the way people are looking at it. The movements that are calling for feminism and women's rights is holding the banner of defending women's rights everywhere, bringing equality to women, which is rightfully needed, but sometimes they do exaggerate and they do go to extreme measures just to prove a point or just to bring a case or win a case. The nature of humanity that throughout history, without civilization, without religion, without guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or without following the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it has been the case that men did oppress women or mistreat women in a way or another. Whether the tribal values, the cultural values. I mean, before Islam, if a man was given the news that he has a baby girl, he will get so upset. Because according to his understanding, a girl or a daughter will bring shame to the family. So they would do what? They'll bury her alive. At the same time, there was a debate in Europe whether women are humans or devils or demons, evil spirits. Women used to be considered like property. Even among the kings, they will promise, whoever does this to me, I will marry him my daughter. Doesn't matter if the daughter is okay with that or not. Women in Europe, if they speak up against authority or they speak up against injustice or they decide to want to learn or read, they will say these are witches. And sometimes they'll burn them alive in the middle of the town. In some parts of the world, like the subcontinent in India, until 16th, 17th century, if a man dies, they burn his body, and guess what? They burn his wife with him, alive. Until recently, some cultures, some villages in the Far East Asian countries, if a husband dies, they bury him, and they bury his wife with him alive. So it's been the case, if you put a man and a woman in an island without police, without government, without civilization, it's been the case that the man physically is stronger most of the times, and he will be controlling and sometimes mistreating a woman. Now religion comes to regulate this relationship. When Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came with the message of Islam, came with so many rights for the women in a time that there were no rights for women. Women became able to choose whomever they want to get married to. According to Islam, they have to. No one can force a woman to marry somebody. According to Islam, women are able to inherit if someone dies from their family. That was not the case before. Education, Islam promoted and encouraged education for both genders, and many other rights and many other things that were given to women in Islam. Until recently, in Europe, women had to fight for their rights. In America, Do you know that less than 100 years ago, Harvard University would not accept women? When the first woman applied to medical school, there was a big cry out. It was something that you cannot believe. Until now, we see the picture that the first woman who ran in the marathon, women were after her, chasing her and hitting her. So there are things that just we forget, but just only recently became different. Until recently, the marriage age for women in some states in America was 8 years old, and 9 years old, and 10 years, and 12 years old. So it's important for us to understand where Islam stands when it comes to women's rights and all that. So what we will do, inshallah, starting next week, we want to go through a couple of verses in the Quran. Mainly we'll start with Surah At-Talaq. Surah At-Talaq, we mentioned it briefly a few months ago when we were talking about the verses that starts with Ya Ayyuhan Nabi. And we want to talk more about this beautiful surah, Surah At-Talaq, which titled Divorce. And a lot of people don't like to read it because they think that if you read it, that means you are going through divorce. That is not necessarily the case. This surah is training us how to treat each other, especially how husbands should treat their wives in the worst case scenario, which is divorce, but also it's a good lesson and good training for us how to treat each other, especially how men should treat their wives during normal marriages. And we'll find amazing messages and amazing points in this surah that inshallah will teach us how to not only be better husbands, but teach our sons to be better husbands, teach our family members how the relationship should be, and hopefully also sisters will also learn about this important surah in the Quran. So inshallah, starting next week, we'll start tafsir Surah At-Talaq. We'll start with one verse or two verses at a time and try to conclude the lessons from this surah. I always advise newlyweds or young couple who are engaged to read this surah and learn it because there are a lot of lessons in it that they can benefit in their marriage life. With that said, any questions or any points about this topic that you'd like us to tackle or mention during these sessions? Okay. So inshallah, starting next week, we'll start with Surah At-Talaq, verse number 1. And the point again is to understand the proper way of how Islam looks at the relationship between men and women. What we live in nowadays in America is a little bit extreme, and it's causing major problems. It's causing husbands to run away and many single moms, and men are not wanting to get married, and so on and so forth. So hopefully, inshallah, will contribute to fix this problem, at least within our community, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.